Welcome to Coffee and Geography, where my guests and I geek out about the world and everything on it, discovering that we are all geographers in some way, shape or form. I'm your host, Kit, and my pronouns are they, them or she, her. So settle down with a brew, hit that subscribe or follow button, and enjoy the listen. Hello everybody and welcome back to Coffee and Geography, and I've got someone joining me who I'm meeting for the very first time, which is great. I love this, the kind of spontaneity of this podcast. And hello Colleen, how are you?
Good, how are you doing? Nice to meet you, Kit.
Yeah, so Colleen, you are doing a PhD in marine science, which sounds absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And you're located...
in Saudi Arabia, which is
Arabia, yeah.
unusual, I think, for most people.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to be talking about that quite a fair bit. So you're studying marine science in the Red Sea, and it says here that you've always loved maps, people, places, cultures, languages, long before you became a geographer, and you love to see interesting maps and love some spicy spatial analysis. And I just love putting the word spicy in front of spatial analysis. I see what you did there. Yeah, so you just said it may be a bit strange for having someone, coming on from Saudi Arabia, but yeah, so is it the academics has just taken you there? You've ended it there? Have you always wanted to go somewhere like the Middle East or in Western Asia?
I always wanted to go somewhere in the Middle East, or anywhere really. Like I'm interested in lots of places in the world, and Saudi Arabia is unusual. It wasn't something that like a lot of people got to go to. I first came here 8 years ago, and the culture here was a little bit more restrictive. Now tourism and a lot of things are more open. Saudi Arabia is getting a little bit more liberal than it has been in the past. So that's kind of interesting to see. The Red Sea is right outside my door. So I'm pretty excited to be able to work so closely with the water and to do mapping.
So I was going to ask this question really just to be a bit silly, but I kind of know the answer because of like where your location. But I doubt that you would like to just walk out in your pajamas, get some data collection, and come back in again. But I'm pretty sure it's not quite as simple as that.
Well, I don't know that walking in your pajamas into the water is a good idea anywhere.
Yeah, no, true.
But actually, I think there's a misconception about Saudi Arabia and its clothing requirements.
Okay.
That is a little bit of a misconception. I wear jeans and t-shirts quite often. And the community I live in is pretty open with whatever you're wearing. And then just out and about, I don't have to cover up or anything like you might see in the movies or TV. It's quite a bit more, quote unquote normal, than how media makes things out to be.
No,
which I think is kind of how everywhere is. Honestly, we try to like make things seem more exotic when we see them on TV for entertainment value, but
yeah. I think you're totally right there. And last season, I spoke to a geography teacher who used to live in the UK, who comes from the UK, but now lives and works in Qatar, in an international school in Qatar. And she said the same thing. It's like, it's really interesting how when you do travel places, yes, of course, if you want to go to the touristy areas, they're going to seem exotic and different. But really, when you go to, another place in most places around the world, just like, oh, pretty much seen this before, kind of thing. So that's really, really interesting. And of course, one of the things that I like to teach about is, how the world is, stereotyping the world is not helpful. I'm very decolonial, so we talk a lot about, the richness of continents such as Africa and how you can't stereotype, there's no real such thing as like, oh, they've all got 6 children and are all poor and all that kind of stuff. So it's a very, very important point that you make there. You mentioned about being there for 8 years. So I can tell by your accent that you're not from the Middle East.
No, I'm American.
Yeah. So whereabouts in the States are you from?
I'm from South Carolina, which is on the East Coast, a little bit above Florida.
Yes. So you got Florida folks. So you probably might know where Florida is because so let's stereotype. We just talked about stereotype. Brits, if we stereotype you, you probably may know where Florida is. So then you've got Georgia, and then you've got the Carolinas just to the north of that. And folks who listen know this, but you're learning for the first time, Colleen, is that my wife is from the Twin Cities, from Minnesota, and my
Oh,
family is half American.
I did my master's in Minnesota. So,
Oh, right.
I mean, not my master's, my undergrad in Minnesota. Sorry, my husband did his master's in Minnesota.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's where half well the kids they're half Minnesotan. So, but they don't say things like "yar" and stuff like that. Against with
Or
the
oofda.
stereotyping.
Oofda's my favorite Minnesotan.
My late mother-in-law used to say that a few times. Yeah, so you've within those 8 years then since you moved in, so you're coming from what appears again stereotyping again appears to be kind of like a liberal place of the United States, though some people say if you go to the South, the United States, not as liberal, but we are generalizing here.
Sure.
And then you're going over to Saudi Arabia, and you've been there for 8 years. So yeah, describe to us kind of like from your point of view, and by all means, you could say from your Western American point of view, how Saudi Arabia has changed in those 8 years, or if you were to like imagine the 8 years of you'd never happened, and now you were to come to live to Saudi, would it be like a completely different place from 8 years ago?
For sure. So Saudi Arabia right now is going through what they have like called a Vision 2030. And they're trying to get away from oil. They're trying to get away from all of these things, and they're trying to become a little bit more like a Dubai is kind of what's happening here. So they're building these huge projects. I don't know if you've heard of NEOM, which is like a big city that they're just kind of building from scratch. And it's in the northern part of Saudi Arabia. It's in the Gulf of Aqaba, actually. And then right in there. And then they have another project that's a little bit below that, which is the Red Sea Global Project, and that's going to be a tourist / marine reserve. So that's pretty interesting. And then where I live is a big university city type place. And it's all about bringing people from all over the world to like basically be a think tank university, like MIT or something like that. And so it's really interesting because Saudi is really, really trying hard to bring itself out of this stereotyped mindset into something more of the future. And I think they're succeeding at it. They're putting in lots of infrastructure. They're having people like musicians and parties and concerts and movie theaters and all of those things that weren't here 8 years ago are now coming in. Imagine Dragons was just here a couple weeks ago. So
Wow.
people that you've heard of are coming. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and it's interesting to me, like thinking about the history of human civilization, is like by that kind of standard of measurement of how civilizations evolve. Of course, that part of the world, were very progressive back in the day, and it seems as though, for me, and I realize I'm probably being very colonial with the way I'm thinking here, but it's as though that they're almost returning to their roots.
It is actually one of the reasons the university that I am at, which is called KAUST, got started, was that the king, who was the king at the time, he's since passed, was like, hey, we used to be an education dominated part. I mean, that's where algebra and all these, things come from. We used to be known for that, and we want to bring that back. And so he built a couple of universities and was trying to bring that back into the world. He wanted Saudi to be known for that again.
The more that countries do this, and the people of nations are allowed to kind of be this creative and show their talents and their wisdom, is just benefit for everybody, really. Um, like the things when I went and visited places like South Africa and Malawi, and I saw the ingenuity and the talent and the intelligence and the know-how, based on learnt knowledge and stuff like that from their own cultures. It's like the story I used to tell when I used to go and do the teacher exchange in Malawi is that I taught one of the geography lessons there, and I kind of liked to flip the script because the students would say, "Oh, you're from England, you're from the UK," and they had this kind of streets paved in gold kind of mindset, and I actually flipped the narrative and I said, "No, I want you to tell me what we should be learning from you, what we have lost by becoming disconnected through community, through the environment, and things like that." And yeah, the kids burst out laughing, but it was a lovely moment. Laugh as in, like, what? Wait, you're here to teach us about you? I'm like, no, like, I want to know about you. And we did this amazing lesson about kind of like the problems that quote unquote developed nations have because of their capitalist driven cultures and societies, because of their overconsumption. And it was just a lovely moment, really. And so the more the better, I believe, for that kind of stuff.
For sure. And there's all these backgrounds and people that, there's a reason representation matters. And it's not just because, oh, if I see someone that looks like me on television, that helps me. It does. But also, we're coming from such different backgrounds, and my experience is different than your experience. And we bring something to the table for that.
That's it. Yeah. You're definitely preaching to the converted here as somebody who really does embrace and loves diversity. Because I just think, as a geographer, it just makes the world so much more interesting to learn about and to teach about. So, 100% get you. Before we get too far into talking about this amazing stuff, I just realised I haven't asked you about your brew yet. So, Coffee and Geography, the podcast as it's named. What do you tend to drink? I mean, do you go for some home comfort from back in the States, or is there something in particular to where you live now that you drink, or do you just grab any other coffee or tea off the shelf?
So I'm kind of new to drinking coffee, not a huge coffee drinker, but I do enjoy coffee. And I like just a regular like latte is good for me, like an iced latte or hot latte, either way. Um, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's pretty plain, but like that's kind of what I
No,
like.
that's fine. Yeah, that's plain. I've been getting into spiced chai lattes recently, and I'm not a
Haven't
coffee
tried
drinker. Yeah, I mean, at the moment I've just got some peppermint tea because I don't know. I feel like I need a bit of detox.
that. I do
This
like
is
some peppermint tea.
yeah, it's a Sunday, time for detox. This is so cool. So tell us a bit about like your actual studies then. So you're doing your pitch. So you're going to become doctor, which is going
Yeah,
to be amazing. Yeah. So Dr. Colleen Campbell, how does that make you feel?
it's a little bit surreal, I think, to be honest. Like, I'm just Colleen, right? Like, it just doesn't feel like that's
Yeah.
a real thing some days. Um, so my studies are, I'm looking at difference in scale, and how measuring things at different scales gives us different information. That's kind of the general overall look, and then why you would want to look at scale when you're measuring things. Like, does it make a difference? And then what scale is appropriate for the measurements that you're doing. So I feel like scale seems like one of those like basic geography things where you're just like, oh yeah, day 2 of geography, I learned about scale, great.
Yeah,
But I
true.
think it's actually really a I think a lot of other disciplines don't learn about scale. And B, it's actually really fundamental to a lot of the ways that we talk about things. You'll hear the word scale quite often. Like if you're watching something, you'll say, "Oh, this is a large scale event" or something like that. And the people use that word quite often because it actually does matter, and it actually is
Yes.
a
Yes.
big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. totally 100% agree with you. And here in the United Kingdom, with our national curriculum and geography, one of the things that, we have certain principles of geography, and like place is one of those principles, scale is one of those principles. And also, I think scale can interweave and intertwine quite well as well, depending on what you're doing. So, for example, you may have a global map. Let's call it a GIS map, since you love GIS. Let's call it a GIS interactive global map of the tectonic plates, and you can turn off and on layers of volcanoes, of earthquakes, different boundaries, and you get a sense of the pattern of global, processes. Great, but what does that actually mean for someone who lives on the slopes of a volcano? What does that actually mean for the regional or national scale in terms of strategy to mitigate against tectonic hazards and stuff like that? So the scale, you're right, the scale really does matter. And of course, the problem that we have as geographers, and I guess maybe a society when it comes to things like climate change, is that when we have things of too large of a scale, like maybe global or international, and then we need to be taking personal action, like such as climate change, it's very, very difficult to kind of relate to what's going on. And that's maybe one of the reasons why our actions as a global community towards climate change is so slow. But I don't know how you feel about that.
I think that changing scale and making it more relevant is absolutely important. So one of the things we're looking at is there, people are fishing and using the water, and they're wanting to use it for tourism and all of these things. And tourism affects the people who live in that city. I don't know if you're near a tourist town, but tourists come in, and it's really great for the economy, but sometimes really terrible for the environment. Even if they're doing ecotourism,
yes,
tourists tend to break things, and they tend to leave trash and things like that. I mean, that's just people. And so, you have this dual thing where you want people to come in, you want there to be ecotourism where people are looking at the environment and protecting the environment, interested. But then you have this other aspect where, you have people who are, potentially harming it as they're there. And so you have to talk to that local community that lives there permanently, like not just the tourists that are coming in, but that local community, and convince them that like this is positive for you. And also, how do you make that better? How is that going to affect you? Are you going to be happy with, hundreds of people coming in, and it's especially someplace like here where tourism is brand new. People don't know what to do. So it's a very new thing. I sometimes get mistaken as a tourist here, which is always fun. I've been here for 8 years. I'm absolutely not a tourist. And it's interesting to see people's reactions. Generally, it's very positive. They'll say, "Welcome to Saudi," and I'll be like, "Thanks." And they'll ask me, what I'm doing, because I love to take pictures, and so I'm always taking pictures of things. And I think that they think pictures equals tourist.
I'm a tourist in my own backyard then, if that's the case. I cannot take pictures all the time.
So I think I get those welcome to Saudi things, and people are quite nice. But I think, it's one thing you see one person taking photos, and how you react to 100 people in the same spot trying to do the same thing. So I mean, I think, and then if you're fishing in this area, local fishing is sort of popular, but it's not as popular as it is in other places. Fishing is absolutely a thing here, and if you have people saying, "All right, now this area is protected, no fishing here," what does that do for you? What about this area? You're going to do this and this, and from an environmental side of things, we're protecting it and we're saying this is going to help you. But how do you deal with that when it's the short term? But that is one of the conversations, is like your livelihood changes, or your yeah, just it's different. And I think that that local scale is something. It's not just, you know, that large climate change thing, because they're trying to mitigate climate change by protecting areas, and everyone's for that, right? Like, oh, we want to protect it, but then when it affects you personally, that's kind of hard.
Yeah,
And so, like, how do we have those conversations where it's like, yes, we want to protect the planet. Ugh. I want to protect my wallet. Like,
yeah,
yeah, those are tough conversations.
they really are. And last season we had an on location recording at a local well, the natural food cooperative. So they are independently run, they're a crop cooperative, and they do things like, you know, organic stuff, and they have like the bulk stuff where you can refill bottles, refill everything. And this is the same, this is the thing that we're talking about. So obviously their environmental impact is very, very low, but one of the questions I asked them was, um, you know, how, what argument, you know, what would you say to people who say that shops like this are not accessible to them because of it comes across as expensive? You know, you go in there and you buy a bag of lentils, and those bag of lentils are like £5 or £6, or, you know, $6 or $7 or something like that, and they can't, you know, they can't afford that. And then the response was, well, yeah, it's a problem because we're trying to convince people that if you buy that 6 or 7 you know, pounds worth of, you know, so half a kilo or something worth of lentils, they could actually make quite a few meals out of that, you know. And so it's better in the long term, it actually saves them money in the long term. But because we have this short termism of, you know, also you know, playing on our survival instincts, is that we just got to get through the next hour, just got to get through the next day, and then it kind of really does kind of hamper our attempts to kind of solve long-term problems. And I guess that's the same sort of thing with the scale, because you got the temporal scale as well, short-term, long-term. And I
Hmm.
guess that's parallel with the local scale. I need to protect my community, my area, my fishing grounds, and then kind of how that links in with the wider scale, the bigger scale probably sometimes goes by the by, but they do all connect together. So
Yeah.
people are worried about that. Hi folks, a chance for you to recharge your brew, but also a polite prod to remind you that it's so easy to support this podcast. Simply liking, sharing, rating and reviewing means that it will get on more people's radar. Also, there are a few links down in the description which may be of mutual benefit. Please do check them out.
I do think that what you're talking about, like with buying the lentils or whatever it is that, you know, being green and sustainable is absolutely a privilege, right? You know, after, if you are a
Yes,
person
yes.
who cannot afford, you know, you have $5 to spend, and you know, what are you going to spend it on? You have to prioritize your own well-being and the well-being of your family
Yes.
over these other things. And um, it's kind of a tough conversation on in that self too, is to say, like, yes, I want to protect the environment and I want to be sustainable, but also, you know, it is privileged to talk about that and to say that, you know, we should be buying these things or working through these things when some people are not able to make those kinds of choices. I don't know if you know the Sam Vimes boot theory, um, but I don't know if you're aware of that. It's from Terry Pratchett.
Okay, I'm a big fan of Terry Pratchett, so yeah, please tell us, please tell us.
Okay, okay. I was like, you're British. So Sam Vimes is a character. Is a police cop, beat cop, and he's talking about how he has these pair of shoes that he wears, and they worn thin, and he can tell like all the streets through his soles of his shoes because they're so thin. And he starts talking about how the cost of his shoes are cheap, but he has to go and buy them more frequently than than someone who buys a solid pair of boots. And so, and he talks about how the poor stay poor because of this like type of boot situation where you have to buy cheap products over and over again, whereas someone who can spend just a little bit more can buy, something
Yes.
like good and quality and can last longer. And even if it's just a small margin. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing with the this the sustainable privilege is that some of us can buy that long-term quality thing, and then some of us can't.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about sustainability and things like that, we do need to remember that there is privilege involved in those conversations.
That's fantastic. That's really well put. Well, and I've just looked up the Sam Vine's Boots theory. So the Sam Vine Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness, often simply called the Boots theory, is an economic theory first popularised by English fancy writer Terry Pratchett in his 1993 So I have read Discworld novel Men at Arms. So yeah, and you're absolutely spot on. And this is something that, especially in the last, say, 10 or so years, I've been undergoing, and I've mentioned this a lot in the podcast. I've undergone quite a few privilege checks, and I've come to habituate those and take them very healthily. So I like having my privilege check. I think it's a way of staying
Oh
real
yeah,
to the
for sure.
world. So whereas at the moment it's still seen as very toxic, but I think it's completely opposite if you embrace it. And so what we try and do here is that, I mean, we're middle class. I mean, we come from a working class background, but we have been lucky enough. That's one privilege. We've been socially mobile. Not everybody can get out of middle class very easily, working class very easily. And circumstances have allowed us to be able to have a mortgage on a house rather than rent it. Circumstances mean we've been able to save money for solar panels on a roof, to get an electric car, and then, but we don't stop there. Every time we scrimp and save, we try and do stuff which basically shrinks our carbon budget and just gives a little bit of a buffer for people who can't afford to shrink their
Mhm.
carbon budget. So people say, Kit, why are you putting more solar panels on the roof when you've got enough to power your home? It's like, I want to be drawing less energy out of the grid. I want to be making sure that I'm negative carbon, because there are people out there who cannot afford to put solar panels on their roof. And when I'm producing surplus power, I know that's going back into the grid, and okay, fine, it goes into the mix. But for every unit I'm exporting, there's somebody out there who hasn't got this stuff who's importing that unit of solar power. So that's one of the ways I've tried to pay my privilege forward.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course, we volunteer a lot. We do a lot for charity, and stuff like that. And a lot of my educational stuff is to kind of try and empower people who have less privilege. So, and even being transgender, I know that because I'm white, I have huge privilege over, say, for example, trans people of color, for example. So,
Sure.
yeah, and I just feel, folks, that we shouldn't really be shuddering at the word privilege. And I think what you've just done there, Colleen, with that example, is a perfect example, and this is one of the reasons why I love Terry Pratchett. Well, he's a trans ally for a start.
For sure.
But yeah, that I'm going to have a look. We've got it on the bookshelf, so I'm going to have a look at that. So it's the Men in Arms novel, and I'm going to look that up again, because that is just a perfect analogy. Yeah, of course you could buy cheap shoes; they'll get you through a few weeks or something, but then you have to keep buying those bloody shoes. So yeah,
Yeah. It's
that's right.
it's it's an interesting topic, and I think that it goes well with a lot of things, like, as geographers, we do explore the world, and we do see, like, people in a lot of different circumstances and a lot of different ways the world works. And I think one of the things that we see is, we come from, one part of the world, and we go to another, and the things that work in one part of the world don't always work in another.
Yeah,
Just, I mean, because people are different, and the land is different sometimes. Like, something you do in forestry would probably not work here in Saudi very well, just because we don't have forests the same way, right? So, like,
right.
there's
Yeah.
just a lot of different things that, you know checking those kinds of privileges, and then also, seeing the different people, and seeing how we can be, different and better because of that.
Yeah, and that is why local and indigenous knowledge is so important, and why we shouldn't be ignoring it, and why it needed, like in the last IPCC report, they put it a little bit in there, but they need a whole working group of indigenous people. I've said that so many times. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I've mentioned
That's
this
okay.
before. So, yes, going back to your studies then. So, what I know you've kind of briefly talked about roughly what you're doing at the moment. So
Mhm.
what your thesis itself then, so what is it exactly you're aiming to try and find out through your thesis?
So I have 4 chapters. So I'll just kind of go briefly through the chapters.
Sure.
Chapter, sorry, this is how PhD students always are talking.
I,
Hey, let me
I,
give you
I
major
asked it
boost.
when I asked this a PhD student, it's just like, Kit, we only got like a few minutes. Come on, seriously.
Just give you basically the title. So we have some sargassum, which is a kind of algae that grows in huge patches out on the outside of the reef on the exposed side, and they are seasonal. And we're trying to see if we can map seasonal change in patterns through that, and using some satellite imagery. So it's something we've observed just by being here and looking at it and going out to the field, but it's not something that's been quantified yet. So I'm looking at 5 years worth of satellite imagery and quantifying it. That's chapter 1. That's in a nutshell. Chapter 2 is there are these really cool fish that live at the top of the reef, and they have these territories, which are algae as well. And you can see a clear line of where their territory begins and territory ends. But it's really hard to measure that territory in the water. As you can imagine, getting a tape measure in the water would just be really, really difficult.
Yes.
And so I flew a drone over some reefs and looked to see if we could actually see, the one question was like, we can see it in the water where these territories are, but can we actually see it from the air? And we can, which is really cool. And so I flew a drone over and did some mapping that way. And then also now I'm looking at using some satellite for long-term knowledge of it to see if there's any changes seasonally in those territories. And then chapter 3 is where we're looking at there's a reef restoration group that has just started where they're coming and restoring coral reefs that have either been damaged or just aren't thriving as well as they could be. And so one of the first things they're doing is putting out sensors, all kinds of sensors for like salinity, temperature, wave action, those kinds of things. And they want to know how many sensors they need to put out and how often the sensor should take measurements. They're coral people, so they don't know. They're like, we know we need these measurements. So basically what I'm going to do is look at the sensors they have and the area they want to cover and then use some GIS to figure out how many sensors they need and where they should go.
Okay, so I've just looked at your Twitter feed then, and so I've seen a map here by Natalia Delgadillo. Is that the map of the sensor
No,
sites?
that's a map I helped someone make a while ago about corals that have biomes. Like she works on helping corals be healthy. So she does antibiotics and probiotics on corals. And so
amazing.
she was wanting to know how to make a map about that. So that's the map that we made. So
okay, cool.
Not related, but sort of related. Still in the water.
Right, I see a map. I'm like, I need to ask about that. Sorry. So that was it. And then finally, so your fourth and final chapter, not last.
Fourth and final chapter is where should those corals be? So they're actually growing corals in like a nursery, and they want to put them in the place that's going to be the best for them to thrive. And so basically making a site suitability of that area and finding out where these corals would do best. That is the nutshell version of the thesis.
That's 4 very cool nutshells, though.
And very different things, but talking about scale and all of those things.
Yeah, well, and we can only really skim through with this particular podcast. But what I really do hope happens is that, as I say, well, before we recorded, I said that we do have a lot of educators and high school teachers in particular listening to this. And what we'll ask you at the end is like, how can people get in touch with you? Because like one thing I really hope comes from this podcast is like people say, Colleen sounds like an amazing person to speak to. You know, their students are studying something like that, or they might have a student doing a piece of coursework or something on coral reefs or something like that. And they'd be like, you know, get in touch with. So that's the reason. So if you can only just give us nutshells like you just did, I'm hoping someone listening is going, oh, Colleen sounds like exactly like someone I can get in contact to. You know,
I'm always happy to hear from people.
Yeah, because, you know, we love to inspire the next generation, and who, you know, because it's like, who's going to pick up this work when I'm done with it, you know, kind of thing.
Sure, for sure.
Yeah, that is so awesome. And, you know, I have an ex-student who actually has been on the podcast, who I taught GCSE geography, so I guess the equivalent of your high school diploma in all things geography, environmental science, that kind of stuff. And she is doing marine biology now. She's doing her PhD in marine biology. So yeah, it's really good. Nice. Hi, Caris. So, yeah, we meet up for coffee every Monday at the university. So that's pretty nice. Right. We're going to do something a little bit of fun now ish. We're going to, it's the first time this season I've done it. It's jog on, and it sounds complicated, but it really is straightforward. I'm going to give you 5 random topics. I'm going to click a random topic generator. And then if you want to talk about it for just 60 seconds, you say jog on. If you don't, you say take a hike.
Okay.
I know, this is my terrible puns. But you have to talk about 3 of them. So you need to, you know, if you
say the first 2, I'm stuck on the last 2.
Yeah, exactly. That's the twist. Twist. Right. So there's 5. Right. So here we go. Right. Okay. The first topic is soulmates. Now, of course, you don't have to divulge any personal information at all, but it could be, do you have a soulmate? What's your opinion on soulmates? Or you could just say, nah, take a hike. I'm leaving that one.
Oh, I think take a hike.
Okay. All right. So, 3 out of 4 then. So you can skip one more, I guess.
Okay.
And bearing in mind we are a family-friendly podcast, the next topic that's come up is curse words.
Okay. Jog on.
Yeah. So without saying any curse words.
So I am of an opinion that words are just words. You know, they don't necessarily mean anything except for in context. Yes. So yeah, I think it's okay. My brother was visiting, and he heard some things with the F word on the radio, like out here in a family-friendly environment. And I was like, he's like, oh, you know, why are they not bleeping that like they would in the US? And I said, those words don't mean anything to them.
Okay,
like, it's not the same thing, because it's not, you know, that English is not their native language, so it doesn't mean as much. And you know, sometimes if you think about it in your own context, it means something strong, but in someone else's, it doesn't. And words are just words because of that.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. And also, was there. I mean, I don't know whether I'm doing like a complete. You fell for that as well, Kit. But I'm sure there's studies about like actually curse words actually help to numb pain or help to get through difficult situations.
Yeah, I did hear that.
So if you like, if I step on a kid's leg, I'm just looking at my youngest like spinning around on the floor with the Legos all around the place and everything like that. So if I was to step on a Lego and go, and like apparently it's meant to help.
Yeah. I think that's true.
So I don't know. Write in, folks, and tell me I'm talking nonsense. Or no, I'm not going to say it, because I was going to say a curse word and then bleep it out just for comic value, but I just no, I'm not that brave. So okay, excellent. So we've got 2 to go out of 3. So the next one is religious holidays. Religious holidays.
So there's 2 pretty good religious holidays here. The end of Ramadan is a week of holiday called Eid, and then we have a second Eid week from then, and I really enjoy it because I get the weeks off. So it's like 2 bonus weeks randomly in the year for me. They don't mean anything to me religiously, and I don't have too many religious holidays that I follow, so it's probably it. That's it. Sorry, not anything exciting on that.
So I mentioned Emily Butler a bit earlier in Qatar, and she says that from her flat she can hear the call to prayer.
Yeah.
So are you within hearing distance of the of any call to
Or
prayer?
call to prayer is everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah. So you hear it everywhere. I thought it was gonna be really annoying before I got here. I thought I was gonna hate it. I actually kind of like it.
yeah.
It's
Emily
it's
said
like
the same thing. Yeah,
like a little song. It's in the background. It's not that big of a deal unless you're standing right next to the mosque and you're trying to walk and talk to somebody, and you're like, "I'll just talk to you in a minute after
yes.
it's over." But
Like walking through the school corridors and the bell goes off right by your ear.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
hate it when that
I think
happens.
that's the only thing that it really is like.
Cool.
But actually, it's quite kind of nice. Someone's singing, and it's quite nice.
Yeah, you're not. You're the second person independently who said actually I find it quite soothing sometimes. So, which is maybe quite the point. It's meant to be very spiritual, and as I say, I'm not a very religious person, so I can't access that feeling like those folks can. Right, two more to go, and you only have to choose one of them. So the
Oh, okay.
fourth one, the fourth one is it's just come up with vacations, taking a vacation. That's what it's come
Uh,
up with.
I'm gonna say take a hike, just
Okay.
because I want to hear what the last one is.
Okay, well, you got to talk about this one then. Actually, it could quite lead into quite nicely into the thing I want to talk about last, and that's popular music, pop music. You
I
got to
am
talk
a
about
fan
it.
of music. I'm a fan of all things music.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I love music. I think that once you get like what you like, I think some music is harder to adjust to, just like all music coming at you. But I think it's like foods or spices or anything else, you get flavors
Yeah.
you like, and yeah,
Do you have a favorite
I
band or
really
pop group?
ah. I don't know. I'm like whatever's nice at the time. I like Miley Cyrus's new song that's out that's on
Oh
TikTok
yeah.
everywhere. The Flower song.
Oh, I
I'm
forgot what
really
it's called.
enjoying that. I
Yeah,
don't know if
kids like that.
she's not my favorite, but I like it.
Nice. Cool.
Well, I
Right.
don't really have a favorite.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And when you do have a favorite, you kind of you go through phases, and you have a different favorite for another part of your life, and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, awesome. So we're going to go straight in because we've talked about music. Great segue into spilling the beans. Yes, another pun of. Uh, I was terrible when I was a teacher with all these puns. The kids would just be groaning. Oh no, not that again. It's like quintessential. Right. So it says here, Colleen, that you like to dance.
I do like
So
to dance.
tell us a little. Spill the beans, then, Colleen. So what kind of dance you like? Are you just dancing in general? You just like to get your groove on whenever you hear some beat, or is there any kind
Uh,
of genre?
I like I said, I like all kinds of music. I like to like dance salsa or like ballroom dancing. Um, I did notice, well, one of my friends noticed that if I'm listening to music, I can't help but walk to the beat.
Awesome.
They're like, "Are you dancing?" And I was like, "No, I'm just walking." And they're like, "You're like right on beat." And I was like, "Oh, just had no idea." So I think I'm just always got something going on,
Oh,
whether I think I do or not.
yeah, it's doesn't your yeah. So your gait will change. That happens to me. My gait changes when I'm listening to like certain kinds of music, and then apparently your heartbeat may change to meet the rhythm of the
I'm
music.
pretty
I've
sure
never
mine
heard of
does.
that before.
If my
But
walk is going, then my heartbeat's probably going to.
yeah, but that's pretty cool. Because then I definitely feel the rhythm. I used to be the kind of person who used to love feeling the vibration of like music of sound like actually going through my body, and I used
Yeah,
to
yeah,
love
yeah.
going. That's the only reason why I used to love like going clubbing was I hated oh everything about clubbing except that feeling of that
Like that
vibration, that
feeling
music.
of like
Yeah,
the going through your body and yeah,
yeah. Well,
like
this is my
becoming one with the music for a minute.
yeah. So I do
Yeah.
tend to listen to my music a bit too loud in the car sometimes,
Ah, same,
and
same.
the kids the kids are like, tone it down. I was like, what? It's not that loud. No, it really is loud. Oh, no wonder why I've got tinnitus. Right, well, come to the end now, and it's been an absolute fabulous chat, and it's great being getting to know you. So we got one last thing to do then. We are all geographers, and that is when we link our guests to each other. And I had an absolute delightful chat last week with some school students who are members of the UK School Sustainability Network. And folks, I'm not going to give too much away because I want you to listen to the episodes, but go and have a listen back. But basically, this is a student-led group of people all around the UK, and they get to, take action and educate others about climate change. And they actually had a presence at COP26, which was great. They were the youth voice, the representative youth voice at COP26, which was absolutely amazing. And that's one reason why we managed to get a little bit of progress in the education sector in the United Kingdom in terms of climate change. So they were given the word sublime by Professor Jenny Barclay, the volcanologist, and then they had a good go at that. But they've given you the word, because this is a word that's very true, dear to their heart, Colleen. They've given you the word hope.
Oh.
So the word hope. So what you've got to do is talk about the word hope for 30 seconds, and ideally from a geographical slant. But if anything, where the word takes you is absolutely fine, and you have 30 seconds to wax lyrical about the word hope. So when you're ready, Colleen, after you've had a bit of a think, you can let me know, and I'll start my timer for 30 seconds.
Okay, I think that's a tricky one, right? But I think it would go back to like climate change there, and also just people in general. I think hope is a nice word, and I think we see a lot of garbage on the news and stuff, and like whatever, and it doesn't seem nice, but I think there is hope out there. You have those kids that you said they're doing these groups and things like that, and people doing these kinds of things and talking and science and whatever. I think there is hope.
Yeah, perfectly timed.
Is that right on my 30 seconds?
Yeah, it's one. And I would say that the work that you're doing, and speaking to you, not just through you as a PhD student, but also just your worldview, that brings me hope as well. That we've got, like what you said. You said, like, I'm here in Saudi Arabia, and it's not this stereotype places, and the fact that we're just getting more and more people like getting to learn that we're this global community, and that brings me hope. And
for sure,
that's what it is. Right. So for next week's guest, can you think of a word that you would like for them to tackle for 30 seconds?
How about just coral reef?
Yeah, coral reef. Yeah, we can have
a little hyphenated.
One of my first guests actually chose, just because she wanted to be a pain in the backside, she chose Battle of Hastings. I was like,
oh,
thanks, Catherine.
That seems a little rough.
But it's okay, because us geographers, apparently we can link anything. So it was, the next guest nailed it, so it was all fine. But okay. Yeah, she said, right, why don't I choose something that's history related, because we all know the rivalry between geography and history. So I'm going to go for Battle of Hastings. Like, thanks. But it's all part of the fun. Okay, so we're going for coral reefs. Brilliant. So we'll find out what the next guest thinks about those and their opinion on that. Colleen, so to finish off, any shout outs you would like to give to anybody?
I don't know. I guess just to everybody. Hello to the world, right?
Hello, everybody. Brilliant. And where can people find you? So you have a Twitter account?
Yeah, I do have a Twitter account, and I'm terrible at remembering what my handle is. So if you said you saw it, so go ahead and
so it's Maps C, so MAPS and then CSEE. So Maps C. That's what your Twitter handle is. So now you remember. Now you can log on again.
Yeah. I mean, I log in. I never remember what it is to give people.
Yeah.
And Instagram is also a good place to get me.
Yep. Where can we find you there?
At CC Maps, which is SEESEA Maps.
CC Maps. Right. I need to follow you on Instagram as well. Fantastic. Well, Colleen, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the podcast, and please keep up the amazing work. And I really hope that folks listening, you'll get a few maybe teachers or students contact you and say, hey, you sound amazing, let's listen to what you're doing. So thank you so much, Colleen.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you had fun. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe so more stories and experiences can drop into your favourite podcast app. If you fancy being a guest or have any feedback, follow us on Twitter at coffeegeogpod and send us a DM. Or you could email coffeeandgeog@geogramblings.com. Until next time, keep geogging.